Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Business Travel Show Asia Pacific. My name is Elizabeth West. I'm the Vice President of Content for the BTN Group. And we are going to get started this morning bright and early with the data. All right. I know you've been waiting for this. I'm going to be talking about travel managers, your peers, how they're implementing AI, sort of the maturity of AI. And this is a preview of a set of research that we're going to be releasing next week. So you are the first to see these numbers, so congratulations for that. And hopefully it's interesting, and I'll take a couple questions at the end if you are so moved to ask them. If not, we will have some conversation straight up after me with Gabe Rizzi, who is the president of Altor. So hopefully we'll be speaking all about travel managers and AI, and then we will roll directly into that interview, which is going to be great with everyone's favorite Jen Bankard. All right, so you might not be surprised that in the beginning of the year, we were thinking about what should we be doing research on at BTN this year, and of course, we landed on artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about it. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of buzzwords. And what we wanted to do with this research was kind of level set and say, what are we really looking at as travel managers in our programs? How have we implemented? Where are we on the maturity spectrum? We built some context around that with some interviews with the Wharton Business School. They've been doing research on AI implementation and maturity for the last 3 years. So we looked outside of our industry to see, where are we in relation to others? And we also are trying to offer some examples of use cases that hopefully you can relate to and feels familiar to those of us who are kind of getting started with AI and might feel that the industry is advancing so quickly and getting away from us. I think you'll see in these numbers that it may not be getting away from you, and you might be right there on the curve. So let's thank our sponsors, FCM and Uber for Business. We couldn't do this without sponsorship from our great partners, so we appreciate them. And they're here at the show, so don't forget to stop by their booths and talk to them about what they're doing with AI. All right, onwards. All right, a lot of bars and pies on this slide. This is our methodology, really quickly. We compiled this data in February. We did the survey. We took that out of the field in March. We surveyed 293 travel buyers, and the data set spans across a cross-section of program sizes. So there's a lot of different segmentations there, but let me just kind of consolidate it for you. 17% of our respondents spend 500 to 2.9 million, either dollars or euros, on their annual travel spend. 33%, so a full third, spend 3 million to 24.9 million. This is the group that BTN considers mid-size. 29% spend 25 million to 100 million annually on travel, and 21% were over 100 million. So a really good cross-section of program size in our industry. We also looked at regions where travel buyers had remit because we felt that there might be some differentiation. If you are primarily managing travel in Asia Pacific, where are you in relation to the rest of the world with your adoption of AI? And you might be surprised. 68% of our buyers had remit in Asia Pacific. They might not sit there, but they were governing that area of the globe. But what you might be a little bit more surprised about is that the adoption of AI so far is quite widespread, but it is shallow. About 3/4 of organizations are using AI in travel in some form, but fewer than 10% have embedded it into the multiple workflows or into strategic decision-making in their organizations. So this is the total data set. We had 286 respondents chiming in on this particular piece of information in this particular question. If we look at Asia Pacific buyers only, so those with remit over Asia Pacific, what we find is only the slightest shift in these numbers. And where the shift really is in that bottom tier, which is, they say they're not using AI at all. A quarter of the total data set were not using AI yet at all in their programs. But if you look at those buyers with remit over Asia Pacific, that shifts to about 1/5. So a little bit more advanced here in the Asia Pacific region in terms of initial efforts in artificial intelligence applications in your programs. However, if you go to those top two boxes, what you'll see in the total data set is 8% combined, so the 7 and the 1%, 8% combined have applied AI across multiple travel workflows, or the very tiny sliver of 1%, AI is playing a strategic role in their program. So it's quite a small percentage and slice of you that are really, decision making with this technology right now. And in APAC, it looks almost identical. You're 1 percentage point different than the rest of the data set. So for the rest of this presentation, we're going to be looking at the total data set and not just the Asia Pacific, because we have bigger numbers, just a larger percent of respondents. And I didn't see a huge shift in the maturity of the adoption rate. So we're going to look at the total data set from now on. But I thought that it would be interesting for everyone to just take a look and say, okay, in APAC, we might be a little bit faster out of the gate than some of the other regions, but we're not approaching real maturity any faster than anybody else, which frankly, I was surprised. Maybe you are too. It looks like we have a slide build here. Okay, yes. So most programs are still in testing mode, but let's look at the trajectory of growth and what people are expecting with AI sort of maturity development. So 18% of our total respondent base said that AI use and growth in travel programs was going to increase dramatically over the next 12 months. 69% said it would ramp up. I'm sorry, 18% would increase dramatically. 69% would ramp up gradually. 11% says there will be no change this year in their adoption of AI. And 2%, they're not in the game at all. They don't know, not taking responsibility over AI in any capacity. So what I see interesting here, and it is reflected in multiple sort of points throughout this research, is what I think about as the 80-20 rule. I think we've all kind of heard of that as kind of a business metric, the 80-20 rule, where about 20% are kind of faster movers, and then the others are going to be a little bit slower followers. So I think that's what we're seeing in this spyglass slide. And you'll see that reflected in a couple more slides in this deck. So, I want to go back. Just real quick. One of the things that we did with this research was to talk to the Wharton School of Business about these sentiments with AI, and to kind of put it in the larger context of industry overall, not just travel, but in all industry. Where do we compare? How do we put ourselves apples to apples on that spectrum? And according to Wharton research, and they've been doing this research for the past 3 years as AI has been sort of ramping up in the public consciousness, right? And they said these numbers were really not unusual. And here's why. According to Wharton, strategic business leaders have bought into the concept of AI as the future of business, and they're driving a narrative that sort of once they start to push in that direction, it will become kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They've bought in, so the momentum is really shifted. But the people who have their hands on AI every day and who are working through kind of a narrative that's one level below that executive strategic conceptual view of AI, there's often a disconnect in how they see, the sort of depth of the challenges and understand what will need to happen in order to get to the levels of AI integration that their senior leadership is talking about. And they know it's going to take a while. So there's this more senior level set that is really bullish, and it may have sort of inspired 20% of our travel managers to say, I'm really on board. I'm full speed ahead with AI. Here's what's going to happen in my program. And they are feeling like they have a lot of vision. And a lot of times it's driven by that executive vision in their organization as well. And then 70% are not necessarily feeling that momentum. And they just see this as more of a gradual evolution rather than a revolution. And you may be in either of those buckets, right? It kind of depends on your company's vision and how much resources and support they're providing for your program. But what is almost definitely guaranteed is how quickly this will accelerate once the fundamentals are in place. And what may begin kind of gradually, and the 70% will be feeling very smart about how, I knew this was going to be a more gradual evolution. It could get away from you quickly, because once the fundamentals are in place, AI will accelerate and accelerate itself because those fundamentals are driving that momentum. So don't get too complacent about where you are with AI. Follow the curve. Now, how are we using AI in travel management? This big slide here, big chart. What we found in looking at this chart, and it has two different sets of numbers, the percentage of travel managers who had applied these different sort of segments of AI in their programs. And then on the right-hand side there, you see a box with another number in it, 3.52, 3.94. That is the effectiveness rating on a scale of 1 to 5 of that implementation, okay? So what we see on this slide is that high usage does not always equal high value. And the most widely used applications, which are often around traveler servicing and chatbots and some policy compliance and enforcement. So it's like the top one and the third one I'm referring to right now. And I think those are going to turn orange for you. Yes. So those bars, you see the value rating on those, 3.52, 3.68. Those are among the lowest effective. They have the lowest effective ratings of everything else in that chart. And I have my personal opinions on this, so pardon me for editorializing a bit, but I'm just going to say travelers are hard to manage, right? I mean, you might feel like you don't have a handle on it, but also AI does not yet have a handle on it either. So while we do see some of these as lower hanging fruit, like the chatbots that many of you have been putting together to answer policy questions, to answer sort of just your basic day-to-day questions, which are that's a really understandable way to get started because it moves some things off your plate, right? It's moving those pesky questions and things off your plate so you can get to more strategic ideas and initiatives. But the respondents to this survey, whether you guys responded or not, I hope you did, we are not seeing those as being as effective as some of the other applications on this list. However, they're not as commonly implemented. So let's take a look at what some of those are. So Expense auditing and fraud detection had a very, very high effectiveness rate. And that's been around a little bit longer in terms of AI tools than some of the other applications here. And they've gone a little bit more mainstream. About 29% of our respondents had implemented that. And we do have a little mini case study that I'll kind of go into in a minute about that type of implementation. RFP support, sourcing, and procurement. Again, this is another really highly effective area where AI is being applied, but it's only been implemented by about 20%, 1/5 of the travel managers responding to our survey. And if you drop much further down in the chart, your forecasting and demand modeling and your supplier performance analysis, very few travel managers have implemented those initiatives. But if you look at the effectiveness rating there, those are some areas that are really encouraging. And I would note that expense auditing and fraud detection, RFP support, forecasting and demand modeling, supplier performance analysis, all of those really are very core data applications. And they're not trying to change behaviors. They're not trying to make somebody else do something. You're looking at the information you already have and analyzing data. So I think if you look at this, that is a common thread through some of those really effective applications and maybe a lesson for us to take home. If you want a win that's going to be very effective, go for data because it's a really natural fit with AI and we can do it now. All right. So much of our report that's coming out next week has been driven by travel buyer case studies, by the number of you that have been dipping your feet into the artificial intelligence waters and figuring out what works for your program. So I thought I would just do some mini profiles and you're going to see some maybe friendly faces on these slides. Maybe people you know. There's at least one attendee here at this show who is up here on these slides. So maybe you can go ask her a lot of questions later. But let's start with some of those mini profiles. So this is Adriana Menendez Huerta, and she works for IFF, and she has implemented that AI-driven expense auditing that I spoke about just a couple minutes ago. And thanks to an implementation with Concur, she is auditing 100% of expense reports with an AI process. The technology took several months to roll out, including training of travelers, training of finance, and also the process adjustments and even policy changes that had to be made based on feedback because the AI wasn't getting the nuances of the policy, and it really had to be delineated much more in a much more finite way, in a much more granular way in order for AI to interpret it correctly. So there was a feedback loop that took about 3 or 4 months to really kind of get set in place. And she said there were a lot of change management challenges with employees, and she expected them, saying that at the beginning, travelers got really noisy with the new, more stringent requirements that this was, expecting of them with their expense reports. But they've gotten much better about it, and she feels like with AI, they're really able to do their due diligence in terms of expense compliance. So that's a success story. There were some pain points along the way, but she was able to work those out. But it wasn't just like a flipping of the switch. There were definitely process and policy changes that were required to make that happen. So your friend and mine, Adeline Kang, at MSD International, Adeline actually applied AI analysis to her RFP and sourcing of her most recent TMC vetting effort. And she engaged with her internal AI analytics team at MSD, and they were able to layer AI over a large amount of unstructured data that had come through in the RFP process with numerous TMCs. So getting that apples to apples comparison was a tough initiative, and applying AI over that information was able to create dashboards that enabled her team to compare vendors, surfaced sort of buried insights, and also additional considerations and questions that might need to be asked of the vendors in order to get really clear and concise vision and visibility into what they were offering and how they compared with one another. She also noted in a really easy turnkey application is look at Teams. Look at your Teams capabilities and your AI language translation. Her international team was able to get on the same page, have a great sort of level set for the information because Teams was able to translate the information into native language for all of the team members. And so don't overlook some of the tools that you have in place and how valuable those can be and how you can apply them just kind of on a very basic level, because she said the communication and the ability to really talk about these results in nuanced ways was very much supported by the team's language translation. So that was great for Adeline. And then we have Ben Park, and some of you may know Ben. He's over at Parexel. Ben has done a pilot with his TMC to start looking at AI interventions into travel disruptions. And we heard about some of this yesterday in some of the innovation presentations. And some of you may have access to this type of AI application. Some of the other TMCs do have it. But Parexel has started with a pilot of 90 executives and salespeople. In phase 1, the sort of monitoring system is identifying inaction, so in-process disruptions, and then surfacing alternatives to the traveler, and then allowing them to choose that next itinerary or that alternative itinerary that they need in order to continue on their trip. In the next phase of this, the TMC, along with, I think, another outside partner, is actually going to be taking proactive steps to sort of model, are these flights looking like they're going to be on time? Before there have been any announcements from airlines or other suppliers, I need to get in front of these disruptions in a predictive way and start to surface alternatives for my travelers before they even know anything is the matter, before they've gotten that notification from their airline on the mobile app. So to get in front of that and say, hey, it looks like you're going to be delayed. There's going to be a problem with your connection. There's going to be this or that. Choose another itinerary so that we can get you where you need to go on time. So using AI modeling to get in front of disruption, I think, is another area that a lot of travel managers are talking about and really looking for. And I know some of you in the room already have this. It looks like a great sort of opportunity for artificial intelligence application. So 3 little mini profiles. There are many more of these in our research paper that's going to be coming out next week. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So getting comfortable with AI advances. Let me just go through my papers a bit. I got ahead of my notes. I do want to say that we have had also, we spoke to people all across the travel industry in this paper, and one of the consultants that we spoke to had a real contrarian view of AI. And it wasn't contrarian in that he didn't believe that AI was a huge opportunity. In fact, he really did. But what he said to us kind of push the imagination a little bit further. Not just what can AI do to solve your issues that you're having today in these sort of siloed areas that we saw in these examples, but also how is it positioned to disrupt some of the commercials that we have in place with our suppliers. And just to quote him, he said, AI is not a technology readiness problem. The capability largely exists today to do many of these things that we talked about, and to apply AI to travel disruptions and other areas. But he said he thought the real roadblock was the organizational willingness to redesign legacy systems so that AI could work more efficiently and effectively within them. And that means directly challenging the call center economics of a TMC and some of the other commercial structures that control our ecosystem and that have different value benefits for the leaderships across that ecosystem that they're not prepared to let go of. And that AI could be a huge disruptor for the commercials and the value chain that we see existing today. So I want to use that idea as a pivot to the last 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to go a tiny bit over. The last 5 or 6 minutes of this presentation. I think it's really important that as we look at AI on a go-forward basis, that we're not just consumers of AI, that we start to look at being a builder of AI, and we start to look at being an advocate for AI in relation to our own travel programs and how they're really going to redefine the future of how you relate to your suppliers. And there's some data points in our survey that I actually felt were very concerning about how travel managers were currently relating to AI applications and kind of on a go-forward basis. And this chart is one of them. How comfortable are you with the manner in which your organization's primary suppliers have deployed AI? So, more than half said they were very comfortable with accepting, just sort of by rote, the AI products and the strategies of their suppliers. Only 16% said they were to any degree concerned about how suppliers were applying AI. And I thought what was interesting about this, number one, there's kind of that roughly that 80-20 rule is in place again. There's roughly more than 15%, a little bit less than 20% of travel buyers in our survey were kind of at the level of awareness that said, you know what, I need to be concerned. I need to be a part of how my suppliers are looking at AI in relation to my own program. And one of the areas where I think there is concern is how suppliers are using our data. And so to kind of say, I'm good with whatever you've got, give it to me, I'm ready to run with AI, take a pause, ask questions. How does this use my data? Obviously we all need to go through InfoSec probably with these types of initiatives, but slow down. Where are you using my data? How are you using my data? Is this in compliance with my organization's governance over how AI should be used in my enterprise? So take a beat and really, interrogate the ways that your suppliers are using AI with your program. And so this, to me, was a slightly concerning slide that we weren't keying in to some of the cautions that could need to be in place. On the next slide, I actually find this one, and again, you're looking at that 80-20 rule, right? Do you take suppliers' AI initiatives into account during the supplier selection or RFP process? And I was discussing this with a couple of buyers yesterday, and they're really surprised at this number. only 2% are querying their supplier set on their AI roadmaps and really putting a weight into that roadmap as a decision maker. Like, is this a decision maker when you are bringing a supplier on board? And so if you're not looking at that roadmap, you need to be looking at that roadmap, number one. And how heavily you weight that, I think this is a little bit of a concerning slide. 18% and 2% respectively are really looking at it as a major differentiator. The vast majority are seeing AI as it could be important, but maybe not now. So it's not going to be a great, it's not going to hold a lot of weight in our decisions. And some are saying it's really a minor consideration. So I suggest that this might need to be flipped or shifted a little bit in your priority. But again, obviously your own company's strategies around it prevail. But I think just as a thought exercise, we need to put a little bit more weight into these roadmaps. How would you characterize the ROI of AI investments in your travel program? So this is an interesting, and this is a gut check. This was not among companies who actually had ROI measurements in place. So a little gut check, 50% say it's too early to tell, 12% say there's some strong ROI, 15% slight positive, and some break evens, 1% negative ROI. I'm putting way too much effort into this and getting little in return. So, but I think a broad consensus says we're just still in the early stages right now, and it's too early to be realizing some real positive or solid ROI. That said, that's a gut reaction. Only 21% of respondents said their organizations actually measure AI. And among this set, there is a much more robust answer when asked, are you getting a good return on investment? And they're saying, yes, we really are getting a good return on investment, and we've measured it. So back to the governance. Does your company have formal policies governing AI use in travel? Almost half said, no, we do not. And this was quite variable based on the size of the enterprise. Some of those smaller travel programs, mid-size and lower, they are not on the governance train right now. They don't have those parameters in place. The larger organizations, the 30% who are sort of at 50 million and higher in annual travel spend, they have a much more robust governance, I keep saying that, governance structures in place. 16% are developing their policies now. And finally, and I think this will be encouraging to some, if you look at that tiny little triangle there at the end, what about my job and AI? Only 4% of you guys said that that AI has created a lot of concern about my long-term relevance in my organization. So good news, there's a lot of complexity in travel management. AI is not necessarily going to be phasing out your role anytime soon. There's lots of hands-on that needs to happen still, lots of strategy that needs to happen. And I think that's where this 16%, again, this triangle over here is really interesting. For 16% of travel managers who responded to our survey, AI has made my role more strategic. And I think that's a really important takeaway, that those who really grab a hold of AI understand its opportunities, understand what some of the cautions need to be, and can be an advisor to the organization, can really increase their strategic influence inside of their companies. And for 38% of respondents, at the very least, AI is increasing their efficiency and their effectiveness, but hasn't necessarily increased their strategic influence in the organization. So somehow to move some of that over from that 38% giant mountain to this smaller foothill over here on the left-hand side, I think that might be an objective for the people in this room saying, I do care about AI. I do see opportunities. Let's look at what we can apply, that low-hanging fruit, but also the governance structure. How can I contribute to that? And how can I become part of the strategic solutions for my organizations? So great opportunities, I think, out in front of us. Thank you for listening to me. I know I went over time a few minutes. I would like to encourage all of you to subscribe to BTN. And if you do that, we will be sending you you'll be the first recipients of this total research, which will come out next week, and you'll be able to have access to all the charts, all of the analysis, and thank you. Thank you for being here.